open educational resource and ePortfolio that's organized along with the Europortfolio project called EPNet. Today we are going to talk about two concepts, the concept of open educational resource and ePortfolio. We're going to deconstruct them a little bit so that we are sure that we talk about the same notions and the same issues. And then we are going to propose a few activities for you as well to be engaged in the creation, sharing, pooling open educational resources and ePortfolio. There is one of us here. You can use chat window if you want to ask, if you want to interact with us. Once we finish with the actual presentation, your microphones and cameras will be enabled so that we can discuss more in a more natural way. Okay, so let's go then. First of all, let's see what is behind those two notions of open educational resources in ePortfolio. We'll set the context for further discussion to talk about ePortfolio as open educational resource, then tackle OERs that deal with ePortfolio, and finally to see if it's possible to have OERs embedded in ePortfolios. So let's start with the first one, the ePortfolios and open educational resource. We know that we all collect things. Our collections depict who we are and who are the authors of the collections. We collect artifacts, pieces of art, evidence that show our personal attitudes and our development. But obviously in ePortfolio we share our development as well, our learning. This is the ePortfolio concept that we stick to. So ePortfolio as a product, presentation of competence, skills and development, and on the other hand, ePortfolio as a process that leads towards being a better learner, better person, that showcases development and serves as a learning space for the author of the ePortfolio. As we all know, those two notions are interconnected. We can think of ePortfolio as presentation of our skills or competences and ePortfolio as a product, but inevitably it is linked with the process of creating, reflecting, developing the learning space for the learner. So this is the idea of ePortfolio that we have in mind when we will guide you today through ePortfolio and open educational resources. Let me hand over to Karolina, who is much more experienced with OERs, to give you the overview of what OERs really are and how we can connect them with ePortfolio.
Okay, thank you, Agnieszka. So when we talk about open educational resources in general, we think about commonly available resources which are fully shared, which we can use free of charge, and which we can use together with the right to raise them, to adapt them, and to desert them to send link to the resources, publish the resources adapted by ourselves on our own blog, our own website, and so on. But when we go into details, especially what the user can do with OER, we might find out that the situation is a bit more complicated. Because what does it really mean that something is really open? Sure, we cannot think out open educational resources in terms that everything what is digital, what is available on the internet, is open. Such materials are either fully copyrighted or published under unknown license, which we are not sure if we can use it or not. And this identifying open educational resources, free resources available online, is a common practice, but also a common problem. People misunderstand that everything which is digital, which is available online, is also open for use, for adaptations, and this kind of action. So when we can be really sure that resources are open, if we stop for a minute on the legal issue, we'll find out that openness of resources varies. From the full openness, where materials are available free of charge, is one condition, but also together with the guarantee for full rights to use, copy, to distribute, to modify, to adapt them. And here, when we talk about the full openness of learning resources, but also all resources online, we think about two Creative Commons licenses, which is Creative Commons Attribution and Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike license. But also here we have resources which are in public domain. So those kind of resources which are not copyrighted anymore. I told you one slide before that openness can be can vary. And here we have once we have fully open license, we have also those licenses which are more restricted. And this is the level down of openness when resources are only open into the some level. They are also accessible free of charge. You can also use them. But usage is limited to some conditions. So here we have license with condition non-commercial. So those resources can be used for commercial purposes. And with condition non-derivative, which means that resources can be adapted, can be changed, can be remixed by the user. And okay, so that was the general overview of what open educational resources are and on what conditions and license we can use them and reuse them. And now I would like to say a few things about the portfolio as open educational resource. In making decision about opening our ePortfolio, the intellectual property right and ownership issue has always emerged. It is important to know what the institutional or organizational policy towards ownership of ePortfolio. UK project called ePortfolio created guidelines for digital maintaining IP and ownership. There is a recommendation that learners maintain ownership and intellectual property rights of the material held in portfolio STEM, especially for those materials which are used for coursework and for the assessment. And in this case, the institution, the university and school, does not own the property rights of the content in the portfolio, simply because it was created by studying at the institution, at this university, at school. But the situation may change when we consider the issue in workplace context. When an employee would like to import artifacts to provide evidence of his her work done with working for the employer. And in this case, the employer, based on the IPR policy of the company, may consider that the company has property right to the materials and that the employee cannot upload the evidence to the portfolio and it will be available outside the company. So it's very important to be aware how the policy towards IPR and ownership of ePortfolio on the university and on the workplace where we developed, in the context where we developed the portfolio. Okay, so but while thinking about the portfolio in terms of opening it, it is good to know our functionalities of tools we can enhance the opening process. You probably all know Mahara system as the most widespread platform for working with portfolio. And Mahara allows users to add creative common license for artifacts and also for the portfolio as a whole portfolio work. But it also offers additional options for those users who would like to publish portfolio outside Mahara. And first option is JISC standard lib2a, which allows for transferring learners' own information between different systems. And this standard enables learners to transfer information from old portfolio systems to the new ones, as move, for example, between colleges, between universities, or into another office. Here, learners will no longer need to copy or paste information from one system to another. So this standard allows to export and transfer chosen elements from Mahara to different systems, to the Mahara or other systems that allows also this lib2a standard. This standard also would be support for the staff how on persuading learners to develop their portfolio. They know that later they can use this lib2a standard to transfer, to export ePortfolio analysis. So this standard will help to maintain the ownership of ePortfolio even students will change the university or employ change workplace. And second option also from Mahara is export to HTML format. Which allows for exporting chosen elements of Mahara or a collection of portfolio and publishing it as a separate web page. This option gives possibility to publish the portfolio independently to Mahara. And the last possibility is flat word tracking. We export pages or collection of pages to repositories in the United Kingdom. First one is Euro, and the second one is so there are two main public repositories in the United Kingdom where people can republish their portfolio from HUD. User will be able to do this without leaving their ePortfolio, and this can be done from the admin side. So this plugin has to be for to HADA by administration. Okay. The same situation with the ownership of ePortfolio is when owners of ePortfolio use the platform in institutional or commercial learning management system. Users are most concerned about what will happen to their work once they move on from the institution in which the ePortfolio was originally created. They can also use own blogs or their own web servers, but this, however, requires more advanced digital skills, and in some cases, learners, especially when they are at the beginning of their education, are not aware that they may face such problems in the future. The problems with the ownership of whole portfolio. And here it's one quite new technology standard called Team API, also called Experience API. This standard is called also for modern form of LS. And this standard allows for tracking and gathering experience. So this may be very important API, very important technology in the context of ePortfolio and listing evidence from the management system to external ePortfolio. So this API is a matter of next few years, but it also supports maintaining the ownership of ePortfolio. No matter which way of open publishing of our portfolio use, it is very important to increase and maintaining online identity for the professional and educational life. So going back to the ePortfolio and OER, ePortfolio as OER, what can be used from the ePortfolio of educational resources. So for sure we can use individual artifacts, which can be published under various Creative Commons licenses shown by the author. And secondly, we can use the structure and layout of ePortfolio, which can be really great support for others, especially for newcomers to the ePortfolio, who may struggle with planning and organizing artifacts in a logical way, in logical structure, aligned with the ePortfolio aim. This is also the structure and layout as OER is also very important and could be helpful for the people who use blogs or OERs. Because in the blog, author has to build the structure and build the layout from the scratch, which may be very challenging, especially those who create their ePortfolio for the first time. And the last thing which can be seen as OER in the ePortfolio is, of course, ePortfolio as a whole or a collection of ePortfolio. And here it is a good moment to think ourselves as authors on what license we would like to publish our portfolio. Because when we go back to this variety of openness level. This is more closed and more open. So here we can choose, for example, create common license with a non-commercial condition. When we are sure that our portfolio can be only used for non-commercial purposes. We can also use Creative Commons license with non-derivatives condition, which does not allow adaptation and changes. So it will allow for maintaining the coherency of ePortfolio. So this is actually very important decision for author of ePortfolio to write license or write elements.
Look like
portfolio.
it's me again. We all know now everything about the licensing policy as the OER. So now we can go to the hard stuff about content. And I assure that together with Karolina, we dig deep into internet resources to find out about OERs that are related to ePortfolio. This is what we find out. We would like to share it with you. Of course, we would like to stick again to this nice idea of two ends of one continuum, and on the one end you have the product, and on the other end you have the process. So OER can support both, obviously. In terms of link, the resources to support ePortfolio implementation, production, and the further development by the authors. So in terms of support for the products, for the final product that ePortfolio can be considered as, you can find plenty of information about the technical aspects of developing digital artifacts, digital evidence. There is plenty of open source tools that enable that be easy anybody to produce digital evidences for their products. When we go deeper in behind the tools and behind the tutorials about how-tos and that sort of stuff, it's a bit harder because the other materials that can come handy for us, these things concerning qualification frameworks, standards, even calling for rubrics and any standardized forms that can support assessment procedures. Also case studies or examples of usage. They are very contextualized, and this is hard for people from outside the context to learn from them. So it's even worse when we think about supporting process. Again, there is plenty of information about different aspects of learning this involved into ePortfolios because it happens everywhere. Reflection, feedback assessments, identity issues, they are also present outside the ePortfolio process. But the main problem with them is they are mostly in English and they are mostly very deeply immersed into British education. So it's very hard for other systems, from other educational systems, to make use of them. So let's see what other issues are related with OERs. We also deal with different audiences. We can talk about OERs for institutions, and by that I mean companies, private companies, employers as a type, and educational sector. But we can also think of OERs concerned for the individuals. These are practitioners, these are obviously teachers, learners of different backgrounds, but also individual employees within the institutions and within the companies that I mentioned before. Uh, so now we can see the whole landscape of the OERs for ePortfolio, and as you will now put on this slide the layer of the OER definition, you will see that the whole picture is quite varied, because all the educational sources can affect different processes, different actors, and then in the end they make the final product. This is the portfolio. So let's quickly remind ourselves what are OERs, okay? And let's move. I couldn't live without this project, and although it's really old, I think it's a perfect example of quite good open educational resources. I hope that most of you heard about Face project. It's finished years ago, but it's still sort of oldies but goldies project. Why it's still valid? It is relatively complex in the sense that it contains different modules that enable the tutor or trainer to implement ePortfolio in his or her institution. It is also very reportable. Now it's available on Wiki Educator, but we also have copies of it in different languages, in Polish, Bulgarian, in German. So it can be reused. It contains doesn't contain copyright materials. It contains only Creative Commons open materials that can be reused. And that's what serves for a good open educational resource. That even if the content requires obviously some amendments, enhancements, adjustments after, let's say, 7 years after initial project, it is still usable for many people. So that's what we did with sub resources we put into the full course. So this is another example of open educational resources, different style, different format, because this is a full course for practitioners, for individuals who want to go on with your portfolio, but more into the personal or professional development. So as you can see, it's also well labeled with the Creative Commons license, so you know how to reuse it. You are not lost in the story of different licenses because it's clearly stated there. It's also available in various languages, and because of the relative ease of translation from Moodle, you can translate it to any other languages that you prefer. And the third example that I would like to share with you is something really useful, something unique, something that can come in handy for most of us because it's very comprehensive. It contains most of the information that any ePortfolio person would like to know. And the only thing is only in English. So I can imagine many people who would like to go to the internet about portfolios, but because of their lack of language competencies, they cannot reuse it easily. Sorry for the sudden stop, but I'm also following the chapter. So to sum up those three different examples, I can see obviously challenges for OERs, and may agree that they are not only for the portfolio topic, but for OERs in general. is limited languages that are provided. We really searched for multilingual OERs related to ePortfolio practice, and we couldn't find it. It could be also because of the lack of practice in other countries, and the UK as a leading ePortfolio practitioner. However, without relevant resources, people in other countries are not really able to start with ePortfolio. So we can sort of enter a vicious cycle of the lack of resources and the lack of practice. Another issue is the educational context. And I put here selected educational context, meaning that it is a quite limited educational context. And corresponding to it, the narrow scope for the existing resources. They are really contextualized and though hard to reuse in other settings. That's why we, in MAP project, following the MOSAP trainer resources, we tried to reuse content towards individual courses. And also the fourth challenge that we can see is the lack of clear labeling the resource. As Karolina previously mentioned, something that is digital, that is available online, is not necessarily open. And very often we don't realize while reading resources online, we don't realize it. So if we want to talk about the real open educational resources, we must make sure that the open licensing is there in place. So let's have a brief look on OERs within ePortfolio, which is something which is another angle that we can look at this topic. Of course, I would like to see also those four dimensions of a product, process, institution, and individuals. So think if you are developing your ePortfolio, what added value to you would be to include open educational resources in your ePortfolio. And on the other hand, if you are an author of open educational resources, would ePortfolio, open ePortfolio, would be added value for you? So what you may consider is that opening up the process would make the greater, broader impact of your work and of your portfolio to the global audience. Also, will enable more of networking. The open educational resource community in Europe is really growing. With the intensive support of the European Commission and UNESCO towards this, it is a really profound community now that could be integrated into ePortfolio processes. Also broadening the scope to go beyond being ePortfolio specialist to be more portfolio and OER specialist and vice versa. Also, something that can be also interesting for the experts and for the practitioners is the issue of new open identity. Excuse me. If you are in open education, you may like to create your open education identity in your ePortfolio. So as a practitioner working with openness, working with open educational resources and tools, it can be well presented in your ePortfolio. So those two levels are here nicely nicely presents. Okay, so now, after this very brief introduction to OERs and ePortfolios, I would like you, the 13 of you participants, to go into the discussion and to share your experiences. I can see that the chat is running and the first questions are there. So let's discuss how Europortfolio portal can contribute to OERs, production, sharing and development, and how Europortfolio portal can support you as ePortfolio practitioner and hopefully OER developer. Uh, So Miłosz, our administrator, will briefly tell you how to deal with the technology.
Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So there will be two ways to ask questions. Of course, you can use the chat presented below. If you like to use your microphone, there's of course there will be possibility, but we will be enabling it one by one. So if you like to use your microphone and your, for example, microphone, just your microphone, please use the hand up icon on the top of the screen, and after that I will enable the microphone and the video view. Once you set the right for the microphone and the camera, the two additional icons will appear on top of the video conferencing room on the page, and then you will be able to enable your microphone and talk. So we can start with the questions from the chat. Once you want to use your microphone, remember to use the hand icon on the top of the page.
First of all, can you reflect on policy of the institution or context that you run? And think if you can publish OERs. What is the policy of our institution towards ownership and intellectual property rights? Is there any policy in your institution? Are you encouraged to behave in a certain manner, or there's no policy and you are free to choose whatever you like? How to deal with the coherence and ownerships? And in the end, can you publish OERs so that it supports your identity creation? So, share your voice, please. All right. So the technical issues intervene here with the discussion about open. That's fine. Uh, okay. So you are encouraged as a university member to be open about process and framework. Which means but not names, groups, or individuals. Else can share their experience. Anybody else who is from say something about the general university policy about the owners? Okay. I will tell you how it is solved here in our Polish university. Uh, we have a policy towards openness, so our authorities encourage using open software and open approaches. And what is more, the work of employees is should be published. As a result of the work founded by a public body should be published openly. So but the processes behind are much more complex. The discussion here is about the confidentiality, the denial, saying that it could be also a big issue for the students. I wonder if there is anybody among you that comes from an institution where the openness is regarded as official policy, and where the whole institution is not only encouraged but is kind of thematically forced or systematically made into publishing open educational resources. Yes, Serge is writing about the freedom of choice of the tool, but does it also imply publishing the product, the ePortfolios, as open educational resources or as open resources? Okay, so yes, we are talking more about the open content. We are not tackling the innovation aspect or the aspect of the tools for which are centralized or decentralized. This is another issue, I think, that is not, was not discussed here. There is a very interesting comment by Gemma Turfel, I know if I spell it correctly, sorry, about the open portfolio based on blocks. This is really interesting for us. And what do you mean by having a balance with the assignment? How do you manage? Yes, that's correct. The open educational resources, however, the definition uh, are very much into licensing as well. And if the resource is not open, then it may not, it may be irrelevant if it's innovative or not. So maybe I don't understand what you mean here. I will copy paste Serge's comment about the innovation here in whiteboard. Oh, I'm just yes, this is very true, Serge, that we cannot go into the can with the OERs. But on the other hand, there's so much innovative content that is not open and cannot be reused that maybe kind of golden rule would be here applied. There's no limits in making the OERs innovative. Perhaps the content that is now open is not so innovative. I can see your point here in discussing tool side. That's why I wanted to show you the very old Wiki educator resources that despite its obsolete structure, it is still very useful. So whereas Moodle or Mahara or any other closed system may actually be a hindrance for opening up educational resources. Jen asked about the planning of assessing OERs. So what strategies for assessing OERs did you adapt? That would be also interesting to learn. Yes, perfectly. Hear you.
See, maybe now it works.
Yes.
Yes, great. It's been, yeah, great. It's been a very interesting talk. I very much like the topic. I really think working with open, working with the portfolios and working on reflection makes student teachers evolve from traditional students to more reflective features. So in my beginnings, as I used only blogs as platform, and or whether they are very closed or whether they are very open, I chose to use the open. So I wasn't aware about the problem of the students' feelings on assessment, and I learned that there are things that that when have that they are the object of assessment at university, they are difficult to be assessed. So now what I have done is that topics that are related to problematic issues, I mean to things that can be debated, are treated on ePortfolio, so students can read each other's ePortfolios, and they have to comment and try to create the artifacts to reflect their vision towards that issue. So especially I try to work on attitude towards different topics, and I think this works very well. I'm very sure if I have been clear enough. Sorry?
Publishing. Is it something broader that doesn't concern only portfolios, obviously? Uh, okay. So I think this is an issue that we very well discussed in our Europortfolio portal. As such, is suggesting to redefine the definition of openness. However, in this presentation, we wanted to focus particularly on the concept of open educational resources and not on the concept of openness. Although those two are intervened and obviously interlinked, open educational resources are well defined, and if we are um, talking about this aspect, we wanted you to think of the possible pros and cons of this approach. I think that meeting. I really like the conversation that has happened now, and the questions that you are typing here in chat as well. And Dave's comment about OERs refocusing. Yes, that's very, very true. I hope that the discussion will continue using our portal, and I really invite you to take part in the following webinars, because the more often we meet, the more often we discuss, we may really change education and practice towards the direction that suits us best. So thank you very much for joining us. The webinar will be recorded, so anybody who would like to record it, in a few days it will be available on our portal. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Okay, so should I stop the recording now? Thank you. Okay.